James Doctor for Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Paul Zanon. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks a lot for taking the time to have a little chit chat.
No problem at all. We're here today at Peacock Gym at your book signing, your Ghost of Johnny Tapia book. First of all, when and how did you start boxing right?
How did I start boxing right? Believe it or not, about 2003, I had the opportunity to have a little play with short stories, and it was something private I was doing, and I was really enthusiastic about it. I wanted to maybe make a book from all these little stories together, fantasy fights, Ali versus Tyson, that sort of thing. And one day when I was working in a charity at the time, and a published author, very well-known published author, came around and gave us a stack of signed books. So I started saying to him, how do you get into this? I'm having to go out writing myself, and he said, you know what? He said, it's a really complex business. He said, why don't you just keep doing it as a hobby? And that was it. Well, I was so deflated. And for someone who's took English language GCSE more times than I can remember and failed it, I thought to myself, nah, to hell with it. That was it. It's not for me. So what happened was 2012, I was off to go and see Mikael Kessler against Alan Green. Kessler's comeback fight after the Super 6 sort of hiatus when he had an injury. And the guy who ran the Daily Sport ate at the same restaurant I did in Kingston. And he said, if you can write a little piece for me, he said, I can put it on a website. And I was like, yeah, that would be fantastic. So anyway, he said, I like what you've written. Do you want to do a bit more of that? And I was absolutely bowled over. Grant Miller, I'll always remember the time and the opportunity he gave me for that. So I started attending a few shows with him, pen and pad, old school, still go old school now with it. And that was it. And then I took the opportunity to do a sabbatical about 10 months into that, and the opportunity came to write Jimmy Tibbs' book, and here we are in the Peacock today, and this is where I used to do all the sessions with Jimmy. And it's almost a bit surreal now, 8 books on, I'm writing for a number of publications, and here I am signing a book that I've written myself sort of in the first voice, so yeah.
I'll say it's the Johnny Tapia book. How did the opportunity to write this arise for yourself?
So, Johnny Tapia, what a legendary fighter. If you're into boxing, there's got to be a part of everyone that has got a soft spot for Johnny Tapia, the man, the legend, the boxer, etc. In 2017, I got in contact with Teresa Tapia. I said, I'd love to do an interview with you, find out a little bit more about Johnny, find out Johnny through your eyes to a better extent. And we really clicked, really clicked. And we ended up by doing about a 45-minute interview. It went in Boxing Monthly magazine. I think it's like a 6-page spread, which, as you well know yourself, James, you write for Boxing Monthly. You very rarely get more than about sort of 3-4 pages. So, and it kind of dawned on me, there might be the opportunity to do something a bit more here. So, I got in touch with Hamilcar Publications, and said I've got an idea here. And they said, if you can mould it into our noir range, so it's got to be a bit sort of dark in theme, we'd be interested. I said, okay, spoke to Teresa, said, yeah, we can do that. So it was game on, and went from there, and we cracked on. And the difference between this book and his autobiography is that his autobiography was in his voice, so there were certain stories which he didn't tell. Teresa was there through all the very sad times, and a lot of times where he wouldn't have been able to remember because he was sort of off his head on drugs. So I was able to get all those sort of anecdotes. And then when he passed away, everything from speaking to the pastor, getting in touch with people like Bob Case, Bruce Trampler, Eddie Mustafa Mohammed. If it had been a 100,000 word book, I'd have got in touch with another 100 people. But for the size of the book and the amount of detail that's in there, I'm very happy with how it went, and did a podcast last night with Patrick O'Connor in the States with Teresa, and I think jointly Teresa and I are both very happy.
Without giving too much away, what's your favourite segment from the book?
You know what, and this is the thing, it almost contradicts the theme of the book. It's Johnny being funny. You could almost have a counter book where it's nothing but funny anecdotes from Johnny, but it was things like asking Teresa about how many trainers he'd had, and he had, I said, did he have like about 10 trainers I'd heard, expecting that to be a silly figure, and she went, oh no, it wasn't 10, and I was expecting her to say it was 3 or 4, but it was well over 20, and he went through like 3 or 4 in a day sometimes. So I'm not going to give too much away, but in the forward by Sammy Hagar, you're going to read some funny stories in there. Whenever Johnny stuck up for somebody, and he stuck up for the homeless man on the street through to women, always stuck up for women. And a great little anecdote in Sammy Hagar's forward there, which you'll read about. I couldn't put my finger on one single anecdote. I mean, I'll give you one tiny one, and that's the only one you're going to get, is Bob Case. Remember him telling me about this. So he'd been in a coma, dead on arrival 5 occasions, Johnny Tapia. And one time, they pretty much had the priest into the hospital, said the final, the last rites, etc. And then Johnny suddenly woke up. And first thing he said was, "Bob, what do I have to do to get a cheeseburger around here?" The man was almost clinically dead, and then he suddenly came out with that. So that was Johnny Tapia. Very unpredictable.
You've mentioned you've written 8 books now, with the likes of Jimmy Tibbs, Martin Murray, Jamie Moore, Mark Prince, the list goes on. What was your favourite to write?
I couldn't single one out. They've all got their own different merits. Every time I've written a book, there's been a big hook or two that sort of really draws you in. Jimmy Tibbs, there was a whole bag of hooks. Jamie Moore, it was more than just a fighter and the man that got shot 5 times. There was he had a bit of a naughty background, and there was various other things in Jamie as well, which were just incredible. A lovely man. Martin's, 4 prison sentences, but one of the most hilarious figures you could ever speak to. Paul Ingle, I classify as a good friend. He's just, brain injury or not, just an incredible human being. Well, what a bloody fighter he was. I mean, he beat Manuel Medina, and they broke records at the time, throwing the most amount of punches thrown in one fight between them. Well over, I think, 1,100 punches. And then he goes to Madison Square Garden, takes on Junior Jones, gets knocked down in the 3rd round, comes back and stops Junior Jones. It was, epic. He fought on the undercard of Lennox Lewis, Michael Grant that night, and that turned out to be the star fight. So, yeah, they've all got their individual things. Mark Prince, unfortunately, his stung getting stabbed. That was horrible. You couldn't. You know what I mean, James. You've written a lot of articles, and if I asked you to choose just one article which is your very best, you'd find merits in all of them,
If you could write anybody's book, who would it be?
If Rocky Marciano could be brought back to life, I'd like to do his, because he never had an autobiography done. I'd love to be able to find out the nooks and crannies of that man. I read a biography once by a guy called Skian, I think his name was, and Everett and Skian, I think there was 2 guys, which was incredible. Billy Joe Saunders one day hopefully will let me write his. We got close on one occasion, so but he's a natural talker, and he's there's certainly a life there to be expanded upon. I'd also like to do something outside of boxing. I'm big into athletics and big into my Queen's Park Rangers, so I'd love to be able to write about a QPR player, but someone like Dina Asher-Smith, I can really see her getting faster and faster, and in terms of what she's done for British athletics, it'd be great to do a book on someone like her. So so many lives, so little time, So.
And finally, is there anything in the pipeline for 2020?
I've just signed up with a private client who's not a celebrity of any sort, and a friend of a friend, and I'm delighted to write this man's book. I was supposed to be writing about a football player, and that didn't come to fruition. A couple of boxers possibly knocking on the door, which I'm going to reconnect to probably sort of January time. So apart from that, just scribbling away like yourself, living the dream to a better extent, as cliched as that is, but it really is. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and I certainly believe that I haven't worked for a while.
Paul Zanon, thank you very much. We've been Pro Boxing Fans.